Right this time. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. How are you,
Good
Paul?
to have you. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming in.
Absolutely.
A little clarification needed on where we are as far as the status of this initiative process. I knew it was going to be kind of difficult to get to one page on this thing, but I thought we'd have it done by now. One piece of legislation. This is all from Alyssa Arbuckle, one of our SuperTalk Mississippi News journalists, and she does a good job, and you can read the entire article on the SuperTalk website. A piece of legislation that would revise Mississippi's current initiative measure process to allow residents to propose new laws has died in the House following the committee deadline. What say you, sir?
Well, I don't think that we're dead yet, Paul. I'm going to tell you the concurrent resolution that's out there. We originally did that along with the bill in an attempt to try to be sure that we covered all our bases. This is kind of uncharted territory for a lot of us. Usually the resolution comes through and then the legislature puts something on the ballot as far as an amendment to the Constitution. And then we would come back in the next year, if that were to pass, and enact the legislation to the nuts and bolts of the whole measure itself. And I think that's where we're at right now. You know, the House did pass this concurrent resolution out of their committee. We'll see what happens on the floor. I think we're well on our way to something that we can actually get to the governor one day.
Is this to use this process just a last-ditch effort to keep it alive?
I don't really think we're at that point yet, Paul. I think that we're at a point where this isn't a last-ditch effort. This is a concerted effort by both houses to work through and get some good, substantial legislation out there that could give this statutory right back in there.
Yeah. Well, Senator, what's the deadline on this one? It's the same as appropriations, or when is it?
So this would be a resolution, so technically we could take this
all the way to the end of the session? Yeah. I got you. What's the sticking point on here? I do know that there were some people who wanted to put the abortion thing in there, which makes sense to me. But then again, I'm looking at the point where there ought to be a list of things that, even with the citizenry being armed like this, would be off limits. In other words, you can't raise taxes, can you? Through that process.
That's right. And there are, Section 2 in there has some exceptions to the process itself. Yeah. And you brought up the abortion. You know, the question I received yesterday was after I heard what the House did as far as putting that in, it just made a stronger resolution, in my opinion.
So you don't have a problem with that?
I don't have a problem with that. Remember, if this passes out as a resolution, a concurrent resolution off our floor, it still has to go to the voters because we are changing something substantial in our Constitution. We're giving the people back part of that right, and it's right there in the first section of this. The people reserve to themselves the right to exercise legislative power. Yeah. And we're giving them that, but it still has to go to the voters to approve. And if it comes out this session, I feel like you'll see it on the November ballot.
All right, tell me the difference in what we are talking about and what you would like to see come into the statutes and the codes compared to what we had before. And I know the big difference here, and I think most of us out there are in accord with you guys, that it does not need to be going to the Constitution. It has to go through the legislative process one way or the other, and you can't do it through the Constitution. But other than that, what are the changes? And I know the portal or the threshold is going to be different on this one.
So there is a different threshold in here. You've got a 12% in here, and that wasn't changed in committee. And it came off our floor and, of course, went to the House, and their committee passed it through there. Overall, if you look at this measure, this copies the majority of the language from our current constitutional initiative process. Of course, this is a statutory amendment, a statutory initiative process where you would just be enacting a statute instead of course, a constitutional amendment. But overall, it still just reflects all the language from our current initiative process, and it clears up the whole, the congressional districts was the problem that put us in this situation.
So the 2638, the the Senate bill, and the reason it died was what? What reason have you heard is it was objected to?
So the understanding that I received was that they wanted to see the concurrent resolution move forward, and if the people voted
in
this
that process.
then in next year we would enact that bill itself.
You have any problem with the threshold on here, though? It goes from 240,000 or to 106,000 to 240,000, and I thought 106 was ridiculous because I'm not sure what the percentage is of Mississippi registered voters, but the 240,000 would be 12%.
That is a 12% threshold.
Yeah, which means that only 12% of the people can put something on the books that actually can become law. And don't tell me that we don't have enough money floating around there that could convince 12% of the people to do something.
It's quite the balancing act out there, trying to be sure that what we do doesn't bring in billions of dollars to enact legislation. The 240,000 or the 12%. We're dealing with voter apathy, but we can't let that drive our policy-making decisions. 122 people on one side and 52 people on the other side are working through this. I think we're well on our way to a good product, and that threshold right there, I feel pretty comfortable with.
Now, tell me what the process is on this one as far as the calendar and everything else. How does this work as far as the SCR?
So this would move on through the process. If it comes out, and it's sent to the governor then would, be able to enact it with his signature. And of course, as long as it was 30 days from the next election, it would go to the voters this year for them to look at and them to decide on. Nothing else changes as far as your 2/3 and your 40% and all that of our current language.
But there's not enough time for them to put something on the ballot for November, is it?
No, this would not enact it. I mean, this would the resolution would go to the voters in November of this year. But as far as the other stuff, they wouldn't be able to use this year.
We anything else in that happened yesterday that you want to talk about? There's so many different things going on.
Well,
that's an understatement.
Yeah, that is an understatement. We're at the end of the session there, the last third there. I think we're doing a lot of changes over there at the Capitol, and we're still working. For a re-election year, Paul, you know this as anybody. Usually, you don't do this kind of work in a re-election year. You see a lot of people out there, and they're worried about their races. This year, I'll tell you this: that we've not slowed down. And and as chairman of Forestry, I'll take this opportunity to say that we've worked through a grant program to try to be sure that we're continuing to support the forestry industry out there, and give people that option for more buyers of their timber.
Yeah. We had a chance to be over at the Forestry Commission's expo, was it last year or year before last, and where all of the heavy equipment was, and it's just amazing some of the technology that they're using today. I think this was over in the Golden Triangle, or maybe it's over Philadelphia. I forgot where it was.
I remember I went on there with y'all at one of them, which is a biannual event they do, and we're concerned, and Forestry's working through, Grandma that had 40 acres of land that thought she was going to retire on it and help supplement her retirement. They can't sell it now because of the pricing or having to pay for someone to thin their product. We're definitely out there doing what we can. And like I said, I think the forestry facility infrastructure grant program that we've passed out of both chambers now and headed to the governor, I think that's a step in the right direction.
Senator Tyler McCaughn from District 31, do you think the concern we have about China buying up farmland is overblown, or it's maybe something we shouldn't have to worry about or don't need to be worrying about?
Well, I think that people forget that at the end of the day, there's money coming in from multiple other countries. I mean, if you look at the forestry industry just itself, you'll see that we have a lot of investment groups that are funded, not necessarily all from the United States, but maybe from a European country.
China's nowhere near number one in that, is it?
That's right.
But, I mean, you also have to delineate the difference between a communist country and a non-communist country making investments in this country. Certainly in Mississippi. We'll talk more with Senator Tyler McCaughn. I got to go back to the initiative process with the good Senator Tyler McCaughn on one other thing here. So the way the concurrent resolution, back on the initiative real quick, just to clear up some things, the way that it would end up for the voters of our state is possibly the 260,000 as the threshold. The abortion amendment would be in there, which could not be added. And would that have anything to do with also the legislature putting in an alternative amendment to address that? Because in the past, they always have the reserve the right to offer a competitive initiative in different wordings.
Paul, and so we took the language that is currently in the Constitution. We pulled that language out, and we used that for this vehicle that we've got right here. So it still has an alternative process. It still has the thresholds as far as the number of votes. Right. We didn't change any of that. All we did is just change it to the statutory provision in there for the initiative process. And I'm going to say this: the way this is set up right now, if the House pulled the reverse repealer and sent it back to the Senate, I feel pretty confident that we can work and get this to the governor pretty soon. If the people on that side are ready for it,
get it out of the way.
That's right. That's right.
You did pique my curiosity about one of the things that you just touched on, and it's SB 2524, your bill, 16 section land, authorized long-term contracts for sale of certain products.
Yeah.
What is that about? It has nothing to do with the contract of the land, but when you say forest products, you're talking about the timber itself, or what?
So if you look at that, that's actually going to end up being your byproducts, Paul. That's not for your saw timber. What we're talking about is when you have a secondary processor coming in, whether it be a pellet mill or somewhere like that, we want to give the option for a school district to enter into it's called a fiber supply contract, is what it is, for them to sell their thinnings, their chipwood, anything of that nature on a long-term contract. Being 10 years, I believe, is what we kept that one at. And then it's just trying to provide more markets for that, that pulp timber. It's so hard to get rid of. You almost have to pay someone to come in there and cut it for you.
Yeah, we were going to turn that into fuel a few years ago. I don't think that worked out, did it?
Well, I'm not going to say that it's not out there again, Paul. I'm hearing some rumbling out there that we may see some other investment.
What we're going to truck it over to Kemper County plant and get that done, or what?
You're digging up East Mississippi there, aren't you?
Don't do that. No, but seriously, the pellet industry has grown, and that seems to be viable.
It's a viable industry, but it's not the answer. Years ago we had all the paper industry that was here, so they were buying so much of the pulpwood out there. I mean, my dad used to put a load of pulpwood on the back of the truck and take it to town Mondays and sell it. But you could do that. You could, you weren't making much, but you were making a little bit for your family. And we're no longer there. Our industry has changed so much, and our demand has changed so much. Even with, the Amazons and people like that are shipping in boxes, we still are not at the level we were as far as paper.
I don't think people understand how the formation of our little towns and hamlets in the state of Mississippi were caused by the railroads and the logging and the forestry and industry in the state.
I 100% agree. My dad had a little wood miser sawmill for years. He bought it when I was young, and he developed that with my grandfather and my great uncle into building some houses over around the Morton area, and he did that for a number of years and helped a lot of people out with those houses.
Certainly not in the Delta area where most of the trees were gone because of farming, but certainly in the hills and in the East Mississippi area. When I was doing the Mississippi Magic podcast on how some of the great stars and people we know in music and entrepreneurs, it seemed like it all started from a little railroad town, and their daddy was a logger somewhere or was in the forestry business. Well, it's absolutely incredible.
It is incredible. And I can remember in Morton we had a pallet mill, you had the lumber yard, the pulpwood yard, you had IP sitting over there in National Paper. So we had a lot going on then. The other thing I want to stress is, people need to understand that timber, to have a healthy stand of timber, if you don't thin it, at some point you do risk the pest. You risk the disease, you risk the pest. It's like anything else. You still have to manage that stuff in order to have a good product at the end. And that's where we're having so much trouble, is people aren't at a point of managing their timber because they can't get a price for it. And we've seen the pine beetle outbreak come through. We see it come through pretty often, but that's what we're dealing with.
Don't be a stranger, sir. Appreciate it very much. Good job. Yeah. Tyler McCaughn, who is the senator from District 31, Lauderdale, Newton, Scott counties, and over in the stomping ground of our friend Terry Burton. Always good to just mention his name every once in a while, isn't it?
It is. He texted me this morning and said, do well with Gallo.
He's probably worried about you, you know?
Oh, no.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.